So we have a woman here, late 30s, early 40s, who is basically trying to restructure their life. They're starting over from scratch. Yeah, so when she first came to me, she was in lots and lots of debt, and lots and lots of debt, and was trying to figure out her career. So she's still trying to figure out her career and still trying to get it together. But the good news is that she got rid of most of her debt up until recently. So I'm just going to go through her email summarizing some bits, and I think there'll be some interesting information for people out there. So you may be somebody in your 30s, 40s, 50s even, and you're trying to reinvent yourself, start over, if you will. So we're going to go over some of the things she's dealing with here. It's not just financial, it's also social and other things. So let's just jump into it, and we'll see where this email takes us. She opens and says she has a few questions. The way the U.S. is set up right now, she lives in the U.S., you can't really prosper if you are normal, so to speak. Yeah, it's more difficult these days due to the inflation and the way things are set up to get ahead. But there are still ways to do it. She says, I still have debt because I had to finance a course. So she took a course, a paralegal course or some legal-oriented course. So since she's very argumentative by nature, and I'm not saying that as an insult, it's just true. So I can see how she might actually thrive in the legal profession. So she's not becoming a lawyer, but some adjacent, something which you could do in a shorter period of time. Anyway, her credit card debt is only $300, which is good. It used to be like thousands and thousands, if I recall. So she's improved quite a bit. But you don't want to get into debt unless you absolutely have to. At least this debt is not consumer debt. It's not going on trips or something. It's not buying a new iPhone. It's to get a course in a profession in the U.S. legal system, so she could deal with things, so she could get a job perhaps. So she says, I'll spare you the details. She says, it's the best money I've spent. I don't care if it's technically debt. Again, if you're using your credit card to get a certificate in a program, in something that you like, and something that has lots of job opportunities, then take it. So my first bit of advice, if you're reinventing yourself and you're looking at potential skill sets that you could learn to up your game, then I would definitely say, look into the job opportunities. First and foremost, don't listen to what the schools tell you. Go out there on Indeed.com or other job sites. Reach out to people in the profession. Hey, if I get this certification, if I study this, what are my prospects of getting a job? Would your firm hire me? Do some research in terms of the job opportunities before you jump into anything, whether it be working for somebody or you're freelancing or something, or starting a little business. So she goes on to talk about how their normal jobs, normal minimum wage jobs, you could just barely survive, because the rent is very high. She lives in Arizona. I'm obfuscating some of the things she's revealing here to protect her anonymity. Anyway, so she's concluding that working 80 hours a week, minimum wage jobs, you can barely survive being alone. So this goes into some psychology here in terms of some of the social implications of things. I don't see myself as being in debt because I think I made the right decision to get this course, and it's an investment in myself, and I have the paperwork to show for it. Again, if you take a course where if there's job opportunities, you have to go into small debt. I wouldn't suggest student loan debt if you're going to get other type of debt, because student loan debt is non-dischargeable through bankruptcy, meaning if you take on a student loan debt, you're basically on the hook for life. But if you take on credit card debt, you can just bankrupt yourself, worst case scenario. I'm not saying you should, but at least you got a way out. So she had a bunch of FU cash. When she came to me originally, she had tons of debt, no FU money. And she worked hard, got rid of the debt, which is great because it frees up, gives you a lot of breathing room and gives you some flexibility in life. And then she built up some FU money. FU is it's emergency money. So she built up FU money, but she burned through that, moving from one state to the next. So here she is now. She's back to minimum wage jobs with crappy benefits. So she says her long-term goal for retirement is to save up to buy a piece of property and live in another country, relocate. She finds that the U.S. is not livable now. For a lot of people, it's getting very difficult, I have to admit. She says no normal person can afford to buy anything in the States. Basically, if you don't buy a property prior to 2019, it's lifelong renting for you. People can afford to buy because people who can afford to buy is because their parents financed them, or because they decide to shack up with somebody. So first of all, I think that you're starting to see the housing market crash and crack, especially in Florida, Texas, Arizona. So things will balance out. They always do. That's number one. Number two, home ownership is not necessarily the best thing. You can get a lot of costs. The only advantage with home ownership for me, as I own my place and I've owned rental properties. I sold them off last year. The only advantage of a home ownership, as far as I'm concerned, is quality of life in terms I could decorate it the way I want. I put in my floors and my kitchen and put in my lights everywhere. That's it. But there's also a responsibility. So I live in a condo complex here. And so we have special assessments that are coming soon. And, you better have cash. And then you got to wonder if the board is managing the money and the properties properly. And there's all kinds of fighting starting in where I am now. We've had many legal battles. So it's just, when I rented, it was great because, if there was ever a problem, I just say, okay, see you later, sayonara, and you're out. No big deal. Whereas here, I'm bound to this thing, even though I like where I live, etc. So renting has advantages. If you ask me, would I rather have $1 million property or $1 million in an index fund earning me 8 to 10% a year? I'd rather have $1 million in the index fund and be renting. Personally, that's me. Over the long period of time, having your money in the stock market, just simple index funds will do better for you than owning a property. You buy a property because you want to own a property, because you want that lifestyle that affords. But a lot of very wealthy people just rent too. So keep that in mind. So she says her midterm goal is to land a decent position in the legal field. That's where she just finished her course. Once I am stable, financially stable, I will start thinking about side hustles again. I know what I want, but first I need to stabilize myself. I can't be in a situation of jumping from one crappy job to another. 100%. If you are 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever age, and you want to increase your financial capabilities, you have to invest in yourself. You have to become super valuable. So her taking a course in the legal area, and I assume she researched, and there's jobs there, and they're good paying jobs, and there's lots of opportunity, then that's a good thing. First thing to do is you have to up your own value as an individual before you start thinking about investing and so on. That's the first thing you got to do, and then you got to get that job. So even if you have a job now and you want to move up, you got to transition. Don't just drop everything and try to jump into the new thing. Getting into a new profession, getting into a new business is like walking on a lake in the beginning of the winter. The ice, you don't know how thick it is. So if you go running out there, you could fall through the ice and you're dead. So you got to sort of tiptoe slowly into the new profession. It's such an important part of it. So she talks about having to stabilize her situation. 100%. Again, it goes to not running and rushing into the new thing and leaving behind the cash-generating job that you have now. So she's taking that approach right with her midterm goals. She continues, my short-term goal is to finish the course, so she hasn't finished the legal course, getting whatever crap job I can find to survive while I'm looking for what I want. Exactly. Transition from where you are now to the next place. Transition means slowly stepping into the new thing. You don't want to cut yourself off from your cash flow, that's for sure. She says, I actually want to talk with you about tackling the existence if you're single. I don't know much about you, but I'm under the impression you're not a traditional man. I want to know how you deal with various issues from cultural and societal perspectives. All right. Let's see what she has to say. For example, I don't see a point in shacking up with someone just for financial sake. I can understand that, but traditional marriage, and I'm not saying advocating for it necessarily. Well, I'm not advocating for it, but traditional marriage was much more of a financial thing than anything else. You know, combining the wealth of two families builds, or having two incomes, paying for rent or mortgage, bills. But there are downsides, you know. Half the people I know who got married are now divorced. That's half the people I know who got married are now divorced. And half of the people I know who are still married want to be divorced. This is within 7 to 8 years. So there's like a 75% chance you're not going to want to be with that person. So keep that in mind. Although there is that 25% are still together and they want to be together. She continues, for example, I don't see the point in shacking up with someone just for financial sake. However, one becomes a giant red flag if they're not coupled up. It depends where you live. I guess in certain parts of the world or U.S., if you're not married by a certain point or you're not in a relationship, people are like, so you might have to move to areas where they care less about that. I was and am not interested in kids, but I hear the phrase like, we need to make babies because they would be cute. Anyway, she doesn't like that. She doesn't want to have kids. She doesn't want to have a traditional relationship. She continues, I don't want to be a sugar baby because she doesn't want to be an old age nurse for some much older guy. Doesn't want to be a stepmother, a grandmother. So essentially, she says, I'm going to summarize, I can't hang out with people from both either conservative or liberal or progressive side of the mindset. What bothers me equally is how people don't want to learn anything, experience anything new, or expand their consciousness. It's all about retirement, paying bills versus them, us versus them in everything. Extremely one-dimensional. So he says the U.S. has a very binary way of thinking. Well, many countries do, but that's just natural humanity, right? If you did the Lizard Wizard course, you learn about that. It's very normal that we're binary. In terms of people being just concerned about retirement, paying bills, well, that's, again, there's this famous psychologist, Maslow, who talks about the hierarchy of needs and, you know, getting a roof over your head and being able to pay the bills, you know, having food and clothing is the primary concern for everybody. Once you got that handled, you can start thinking about more higher level types of concerns. But yeah, it's understandable that paying bills and worry about retirement is an issue. One thing you have to concern yourself as you get older is that your body is not the same when you're 60 versus when you're 30. It's certainly not the same when you're 70 and 80. So you want to make sure that you have things lined up so that when you do get older and you might be sick, you won't have the same level of energy, you won't have the same level of opportunity that you've invested in yourself, in your finances, in your plan, so that when you land there, it's fairly comfortable. So keep that in mind, because when you're young, you have lots of energy and opportunity, but when time creeps up on you, and when you get to be 40, 50, 60, 70, it's like, So you want to set into motion a path that leads you to where, at least when you're older, you're not in a horrible situation financially. Because at the end of the day, you got to pay bills, right? She continues, I have friends I can count on, fingers on one hand. They think similarly to me. I'm curious about your philosophy about the above and how to approach it. Mind sharing your approach and philosophy? Thanks, Steph. So in terms of finding people who agree with you 100%, like there's very few people you'll find, especially if you think a little differently, and that's okay. And I think one way to free yourself of the frustration of not finding people who perfectly align with your way of thinking is to, well, first of all, recognize that your own thinking will change. I don't know about you, but for me in my life, over the decades, my opinions of things have changed and progressed based on my observations, my experiences. So what I took as sacrosanct, as being, set in stone 20 years ago, has changed now. Not all things, but some key things. And they've changed because I've learned new things, new perspectives, or I was blind to certain perspectives that I didn't consider later on, or I hadn't considered back then, and now I understand. So I changed my perspective over time. So what I would suggest is that, it's good and healthy to be confident and firm in your own thinking, but also recognize that you might be wrong about certain things. So how does that impact your relationship with others that you may not entirely agree with? Well, there is a possibility, however small, there is a possibility that they may have a perspective that has some validity you just don't recognize now. So that's number one. So that brings in the whole idea of the tolerance, where you go, okay, fine. You think strawberries taste better than blueberries? I think you're crazy to think that, but that's okay, because maybe you just have different taste buds. Who knows? My suggestion is not to get caught up in it all, not to be too concerned about the differences other people may have. So if they believe strawberries are better than blueberries and you strongly believe otherwise, who cares? As long as they're not forcing you to eat strawberries, it's whatever. Because humans all live in different bodies, and because we've all had different experiences, we all filter and evaluate perceptions of reality, our reality, differently. So for me, as long as people are not trying to tell me what to do, they're not trying to force their thinking on me, they can suggest it, they can argue their points, that's fair, that's fine. You might learn something, I have in the past. But as long as you're not being forced into it, whatever, do what you got to do. So I think the key in terms of dealing with other people, there's certain people I just don't deal with anymore because we have nothing in common. I don't have animosity towards them. I don't like disregard them or hate them because they think differently from me. I don't hang around with them because it's just what they like and dislike. It doesn't align with me, and that's cool. That's perfectly fine. I wish them all the best and I move on. So I don't know about you guys. For me, I've had many friends who we were fantastic in my teens and early 20s, but then we grew apart. And I think that's why a lot of marriages break up, by the way. I think people, they get married in their early 20s or early 30s, and 10 years passes and they grow in different directions. So they may have been very much aligned at 25, but by the time they're 35, 40, their perspective changes, and they're just not very good together. And not saying one is better or worse than the other, although that could be the case. It's just a question of what you like. So anyway, I think when you're dealing with others and you're frustrated that you don't align with others around you, just understand those perspectives. Try not to be married to your concepts. Try not to be overly prickly about it, sensitive, and live and let live. That's it. Again, as long as you don't impose and force your will on others and they don't on you, we can all get along and disagree on certain things. So I think generally speaking, she's progressing in terms of her life experience. She got rid of the major debt. She's realized now that debt is not great, is bad. Now she took on a small amount of debt, $300. It's not a big deal, to take this course in something that I think she said she might really enjoy. The good thing, $300 is not a major investment. And she also understands another important rule. She want to transition from A to B, from this lifestyle to the next, or this job to the next, or this career to the next. You want to transition because you don't want to go down a hole of massive amounts of debt. And the other thing is dealing with people you don't get along with. That's okay. I would suggest trying to not have animosity towards them. You can be frustrated with them because you're like, wow, how can they believe that? But also understand you may change your opinion. And you may find that, hey, you know what, 3 years later, they had something that Nancy said that I just disagreed with violently 3 years ago. Maybe there's some sense to it. So that could happen as well. It's happened to me. Not with Nancy in particular, but, it could happen. So try to be a little bit more relaxed about your disagreements about things. And, like I have friends now who in certain areas, I just totally disagree with them. And I just let it go. I just don't go there. It's a waste of time to go there. I just don't go there, and I hang out, and I enjoy friends for the things that we do align with, whether it be interest and whatnot. And that's it. And I do that, and I can separate out the stuff that I disagree with. And then life's a lot easier, Yeah, and in life, it's normal to have, a small handful of very close, real friends. That's normal. And so I wouldn't, I don't think it's possible to have 20 really great friends, especially as you get older. Especially as you get older. When you're in your teens, in your early 20s, yeah, that's normal. Like all animals, you see the adolescent animals, whether it be dogs or, I don't know about cats, but monkeys. They all hang out, and then at some point they get the pair bonding happening, and people go their separate ways. So it's kind of natural. But as you get older, you're going to have a small circle of very close friends, and then maybe a wide circle of marginal friends, if you will. So you might have friends where you only go play tennis with. You may have friends where you just play video games with once every 2 weeks. That's normal too. That's cool. Can't all be alike with everything. Otherwise, life would be kind of boring. So there you go. Yeah. So I hope this video is useful. I recorded this partly for the general public, but also for her. I'm going to point this video to her. I'm Uncle Steph. Thanks for watching the video. Cheers.